After all, tomorrow is another day.
Well, there may be no tomorrow for Gone with the Wind. HBO Max has stopped streaming it. They say they'll bring it back and they'll put it in context so you won't be exposed to one of the greatest American films ever made without understanding that slavery was bad. We wouldn't want that to happen to you. This is a really interesting thing. I mean, Gone with the Wind is one of the greatest of American films. It may be the greatest American film. It's certainly up there with Casablanca. And it has a lot of black characters. And sometimes when you watch it in the modern age, you cringe a little bit because they're servile, they're slaves, and they're part of a slave system that some of them regret once it's gone. They're also shown to be heroic figures of great compassion. It's the film where the first black American won an Academy Award. Hattie McDaniel as Mammy won the supporting actress award and had to accept it in a segregated hotel. She wasn't allowed to sit with the rest of the cast. David O. Selznick had to pull strings to get her into the hotel at all. But she did win, and it wasn't a historic event, and she was obviously very moved. In fact, we can look at a little bit of that for a minute. Just look at her speech.
Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science, fellow members of the motion picture industry, and honored guests. This is one of the happiest moments of my life. And I want to thank each one of you who had a part in selecting me for one of the awards. For your kindness, it has made me feel very, very humble. And I shall always hold it as a beacon for anything that I may be able to do in the future. I sincerely hope I shall always be a credit to my race and to the motion picture industry. My heart is too full to tell you just how I feel. And may I say thank you, and God bless.
The more important thing is this, the silencing of the past, the silencing of the past, the pulling down of statues, the burning of books, the canceling of books, the refusal to sell books for the things that they say that are no longer acceptable is an age-old tactic of the left. It's something that leftists do to make sure the past will have no voice. Orwell in 1984, which is a story about Soviet Russia, it's a story about the left. He writes at one point, every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every picture has been repainted, every statue and street building has been renamed, every date has been altered, and the process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. That, of course, is the point. The party is always right. The moment is always right. Our perceptions in this moment are always right. And that is the point of silencing Gone with the Wind. What else could the point be? What else could the point be? What is the harm of having this movie that we all know was made in the past, that takes place in the past, that contains ideas from the past? What is the harm in having that out there so people can be entertained by it and see what they say? You know, C.S. Lewis wrote a lot about this. C.S. Lewis, the great Christian apologist, he wrote a lot about old books, and he said whenever you read a new book, you should follow it up by reading an old book. And at one point, he wrote a beautiful preface to Paradise Lost, the great poem by John Milton about the fall of man, about Adam and Eve. And he's talking about the fact that there are hierarchies in Paradise Lost. There's God, and then there's man, and then there's woman. There's a famous line in Paradise Lost that Adam is for God, he for God only, she for God and him. So she is under him, worshiping God through him, and he is worshiping God directly. And now every time that line comes up, we're all supposed to reel in horror that John Milton saw that and plays it out in the poem. And C.S. Lewis said, he was talking in this preface to Paradise Lost, he was talking about The Taming of the Shrew, which is another play in which Shakespeare shows a shrewish woman being tamed by her husband until she becomes submissive to him. And obviously, the play is about that, is in favor of that happening. And C.S. Lewis says, these words are very startling to a modern audience, but those who cannot face such startling should not read old books. So in other words, you're going to be startled by some of the attitudes that you see in old books. And all of leftist teaching is geared towards silencing those words that will startle you, that will surprise you. Is there wisdom in Paradise Lost about the relationship between men and women? I think there is. I think there is. I think in the fact that God used a woman to come into the world, to embody himself in the world, talks about not just the essentiality of the feminine, not just how essential the feminine is to our humanity. Even God could not become a human being without a mother. Even God could not become a human being, or would not become a human being without a mother, because the mother is so essential to establishing a child's mind and a child's loving relationship with the world. The mother is so irreplaceable to doing that in order to become a human being, God used a woman. But also, Mary, in giving birth to God, represents all of humankind, because all of us in the Bible are in a feminine relationship to God. The reason God is male always in the Bible, and feminists hate this, they say, well, we should refer to God as he or she. But no, God is always male because we are always female in relationship to him. And I don't mean submissive. What I mean is we are always taking him in, and whatever we give out is made by him, is put into us by him. So we are always literally in a feminine position, physically and mentally and imaginatively in a feminine position to God. And that femininity is essential to all of our humanity. So there is wisdom to saying he for God only, she for God and him, if we're talking about Adam and Eve and if we're talking about Christ and the church. So there is this wisdom there that you have to find, and it's not the wisdom like, oh, women can't be doctors. That's not the Milton may have thought that, but we don't have to think that. We find a different wisdom there. All of academic teaching is meant to erase that. They call it theory. They teach by theory. They teach feminist theory. They don't teach Milton. They teach how Milton is wrong as opposed to feminist theory and what Milton says about feminist theory. They don't teach all the Shakespeare. They don't teach Othello. They teach race theory, which is Shakespeare silenced, canceled by the voice of the professor who is pushing this theory, right? So all you get to hear is the professor. All you get to hear is the now, the present, when the party is always right. You don't get to hear the greatest genius who ever put pen to paper, William Shakespeare. You just get to hear Dr. Schmo with his theory. The thing about the past, the people in the past, is they weren't any stupider than we are. They saw things that we can't see. We see things that they couldn't see. It's that simple. We see more because of science. We have more facts in front of us because of science, but they saw plenty of things that we have forgotten. They see plenty of things about the brokenness of man. They see plenty of things about the necessity of virtue. They have seen and experienced what happens when sexual traditions break down. They have seen and experienced what happens when civilization breaks down. They have seen what it is to be a man who wants power and what it is to be a man who leaves other men alone. They have seen what happens when women act as men, when women take on the male role. They've seen all this, and they have spoken about it at a time when they could say things that we might feel uncomfortable saying. So it's in the old books you find truths that you're not going to find in the present, even though you find attitudes that you might not want to bring into the present. And there's one other thing. Those truths written in the past, written hundreds of years ago, those truths that have lasted are likely to be eternal truths. And those are the truths, the eternal truths, the things that are always true, that the left especially doesn't want you to hear. We should not let them silence a single word that was ever spoken. We should hear them all and decide for ourselves.